Illyasviel Von Einzbern is a character of many traits, some seemingly contradictory. She is depicted as sweet and loving at times, but her initial introduction in any route is ominous, toying with the preconceived notions one may have about her at a glance. She warns Shirou of his imminent death before seemingly disappearing into thin air. While it's easy to write her off as an evil lolly who has a change of heart, there's a lot more to her than those surface-level traits. She is a conflicted individual torn between multiple goals, feeling like they're all so close yet just barely out of reach. To go more in depth requires that I spoil essentially everything about her character, including major parts of the visual novel, its subsequent adaptations, as well as her small role in Fate Zero. So, content warnings out of the way, why is Illya my favorite character? That's a difficult question to answer without sounding defensive or pretentious. As she can often come across as the most trope-ridden character of Stay Night, it's not hard to imagine why she is such a point of conflict within the fandom. But, like Ren isn't just a tsundere, and Sakura not just a kohai, there's a lot more to be gleaned from Illya than the stereotypical Omoto traits she so often puts on display. Flashback to her introduction, and we see the first instance of her showing malicious intent towards Shirou, as well as that sadistically playful nature that is a key component to her character. From said nature, it's clear in the early parts of any route that she has a vendetta against him. While nothing of note is said on why until Heavensfield, to make the puzzle fall into place much sooner, she has a resentment for him because of his last name, Illya. In particular, the man associated with that name, Illya Kuritsugu, whom she views as abandoning her and never coming back. Regardless of reasoning, Shirou took him away from her, and after 10 years of letting it simmer, those feelings have reached a boiling point with her arrival in Fuyuki. All this in mind, her actions of warning him might seem contradictory at first. However, what she does is purely a way of messing with him, to reach out and show how far ahead she is compared to Kuritsugu's kid. She has already summoned her servant and is waiting for him to do the same, so that she can strike him down at his strongest and have no regrets. To dig that point in further for herself, this is the first instance of her referring to Shirou as Oni-chan, a nickname that singles him out as the son of Kuritsugu, as her exalted older brother who got what she didn't. Cut to day 3 after the summoning of Saber, where Illya, along with Berserker, make their entrance. What ensues is a short battle with Saber on the losing end. Illya is shown taking great joy in the act of using her servant in battle, the most euphoric seeming of all of the masters, likely due to her upbringing for the past 10 years being focused solely on this moment. Once Shirou nearly gets killed in an act to save someone else, however, she realizes that the revenge she had long sought after resulted in nothing but emptiness, and thus she leaves without any further fight. Her reaction to Shirou getting attacked is simply, why? Why? Why would he jump in front of that? Why would he, a thief who stole her livelihood, risk his life to save someone else's? Why does Shirou lying there, limp and bleeding out, make her feel so empty? The thoughts and feelings she has in this moment were not anything like she had hoped, resulting in the most hollow she had likely ever felt. Shirou had been built up in her mind as the most selfish and evil person just under Kuritsugu, and yet he gave his life to save someone, to protect someone. Shirou's actions defy all her preconceived notions, and though it has reached an utter anticlimax, she's achieved the goal she ultimately set out for herself. All that was left for her to do was to act as the doll she had always been told she was and wait for the end to come. While these might have been the thoughts running through her head at the time, the most pressing was simply, why? Illya, despite the past few years of a lonely upbringing, still retained a bit of that humanity she's practically exuding in Fate Zero. And, like all humans do, she left to think it over for the next few days, calmly watching over the events and finding out that Shirou is somehow still alive. In response to that realization, she, in what should be a vain effort, begins wandering the streets when she is able, pondering what will happen if the two come face to face. A few days pass, and that chance meeting, of course, does eventually happen. Whereas the prior encounter was filled with malicious intent, here Illya's playful persona is in full effect. Like the prior meeting never happened, she goes through the crowds of people to find Shirou, to coerce him into a conversation and see if those thoughts she had could reach a proper conclusion. Shirou is naturally abrasive to the proposal, but as she plays the innocent little girl card, he is shown to weaken those defenses. The two head to the park and they begin to talk. Illya recalls memories of her and her father playing in the snow, how she's never really had an opportunity to talk to someone like this, and then she makes it clear that she hates the cold while loving the snow. The cold reminds her of the times since the prior Grail War, but the snow gives her a faint sense of nostalgia for the times before that. Nostalgia that she can think back on and use as a source to help push forward. It also helps that the snow reminds her of her mother, who was a source of warmth in the winter castle while she was around. The focus of the conversation switches from Illya to Shirou, in particular what it was like for him growing up. Upon the mention of Kagetsu, Illya distances herself from Shirou and sits beside him. She's calmed down enough to the point where she doesn't view Shirou as an enemy anymore, but Kagetsu is a different story. Shirou casually mentioning his father brings her back down to reality for a second as she reaffirms who it is she's talking to. As the conversation slowly reaches normalcy again, she goes into how she has to sneak out to be able to do things like this because of her fragile position in the Grail War. As the vessel and the Einzbern master, she is intrinsically tied to that fate no matter what she does. Noticing the somber nature, Shirou, taking more of a liking to Illya, elects to share a taiyaki with her. Illya accepts it and begins to get her playful nature back. This time that nature isn't as a front, however, as she seems to really be enjoying the brief time they've spent together. Soon after, her ties to the Grail War pull her back home, as Berserker awakens and Illya is forced to leave, ending the scene. On his way home, Shirou thinks that he should keep the meeting a secret, but is shown to be smiling very deeply about the whole ordeal, citing how he thinks there's two sides to her. Illya as a innocent little girl, and Illya as a master. This is the genesis of his "I don't want Illya to kill other masters" mentality. Ignorant to the truth, he thinks that if he had a little sister, she'd be like Illya, and he doesn't want someone he views as innocent to be misguided down the path of a ruthless mage. The way he sees it, Illya's actions are out of obligation, and not a drive to actually be that way. As with the theme of the route, Shirou sets the ideal of wanting to save Illya from that fate in stone and sets out to achieve it in any way he can. To note one thing, this conversation, unlike a very similar one in Heavensfield, doesn't go beyond a surface level. While she doesn't want Shirou dead anymore, she still does want him in a possessive tense. During some of the bad ends, we see how this plays out before this conversation takes place. Illya almost always ambushes him and disfigures him in some way. However, those endings also show her ultimately unhappy with the outcome. The act of kindness in talking to her and sharing a snack were unprecedented. It's due to this that the next time they meet, while she'll kidnap him and try to keep him to herself, she does give him a say in the matter. Though the choice is an ultimatum, it's a step in the right direction, towards Illya becoming a fully realized person who sees more than just herself in the picture. What happens between the two meetings is just as important, as it sets the mental state for Shirou to be so easily kidnapped. Saber, after fighting Ryder, has used up almost all of her magical energy, and Shirou is left to ponder on how to save her without having to kill other people for said energy. The turbulent nature of his mind causes Shirou to go back to the park and think it over. Illya, who likely came to the place in hopes of seeing him again, greets him, calling him Shirou instead of Oni-chan. What she's about to do is out of pure sincerity in her mind, as she misconstrues Shirou's interest as her own and seeks to bring him over to her to keep them both safe. She calls out Shirou's sad look and Saber being on the verge of death to weaken his mental state further as she looks into his eyes and casts a suggestion spell on him. Noticing that Shirou is being resistant to the idea of going with her, she reverts back to calling him Oni-chan. At this point, Shirou is an object of affection that she can't let slip away. So, even if she knows it's selfish and vindictive, she'll take him by force if it means not having to go back to the cold daily life she's grown accustomed to. Tying Shirou back to Kagetsu and calling him Oni-chan makes it clear in her mind what she stands to face again if she lets Shirou slip away. Upon waking up tied to a chair in Illya's room, she's quick to establish their positions. As they talk, she once again playfully gets on his lap, saying that she'll kill the other masters, but not him. To her, Shirou is special, so, in order to coerce him into a life as her servant, she falls back on her manipulation tactics, saying things like, "Saber is going to disappear, you won't have any way to fight." She plays on all of Shirou's weak spots and tries to break him down before she tells him that he should stay, because she will protect him forever. As Illya tells him this, she clings on to him more. A future where she can be, as she sees it, somewhat happy is in her grasp. Even if it's for a short time, she'll do whatever it takes to get Shirou to consent and stay in this situation, regardless of how it actually affects Shirou. Throughout the scene, Illya is reminiscent of the man whom she hates more than anything, Emiya Kuritsugu, who did whatever it took to make his dream a reality, regardless of how it affected others. While his dream was selfless and apathetic, Illya's is selfish and full of emotion. It's such a complete inverse of his ideology that it loops right back around to being nearly identical in its execution. Her threats that she'll kill Saber and Ren, her actions of killing Shinji and pinning the blame on Shirou, her kidnapping him, and this very conversation are all methods her father would have used had it served a purpose. The key difference being the emotion Illya has, the emotion behind her every action. It's why she can't help but go through the process of getting Shirou's confirmation. He has to make the choice on his own and mean it for it to feel right in her mind. If he doesn't want to stay with her, she'll make him want to. It's childish logic at best, but it's what she's been left to grow on since the last war. As the conversation gets more heated, the sides of Shirou as Shirou and Shirou as the love son of Emiya begin to pick at her mind more and more. With his constant refusals like a repeat of the past, right now it's a mixture of the latter more than the former. As such, she refers to him as Oni-chan before leaving the room to go back up her earlier threats. When she encounters an escaping Shirou, Ren, and Saber, Illya is in a similar position as she was on day 3 of the route, wanting to achieve her goals by any means and not afraid to use any methods to get there. The key difference now is that Archer is here, who can hold Berserker back while the rest escape. Archer puts up a pretty good fight against the giant, but eventually falls. Despite her victory over Archer, Illya berates Berserker for not being strong enough and going soft on him. She might be in control of the situation now, but she's slipping on the confidence she put on display in the previous encounter. She's unsure of how this will end, but it's leaning towards her being left alone. The thought behind her commands and actions is gone, replaced with the anxiety to achieve her goal by any means. For as boneheaded as he seems, Shirou is the one who suggests playing to her rampant emotions and naivety. She's someone who's willing to believe anything you say if you treat her kindly. When she eventually finds Shirou and Saber, she makes one last effort. "If you begged for your life, I'd still spare you, Oni-chan." Like she did for the longest time with Kuritsugu, she's holding out hope that he won't abandon her. She wants to believe in everything Shirou says, because one of those things might eventually be that he's changed his mind. When Caliburn is projected and Berserker is defeated, however, reality sets in for her. In a moment of weakness she hardly ever has and ever will display, Illya breaks down and doesn't know what to do. She's lost both her wish and what she sees as her only friend. Shirou, whether it being empathizing with her feelings of hopelessness, or out of the purity of his dumb, beautiful ideals, still wants to save Illya after all of this. In spite of all the reasons Illya has laid out for Shirou to hate her, he still sees her as a misguided little girl whom he needs to course correct. As someone who had it rough but can be made to see wrong from right and rectify the things she's done to live a better life. Soon after the fight, the side of Illya that Shirou saw, the innocent little girl, is seen for the rest of the route. As she slowly gets accepted into the Emiya household, the malice she had the day before breaks way to a calmer Illya, who's willing to listen to others and learn to be more open. Ren and Saber call the idea of Illya staying stupid, but she isn't going to do anything. In a way, she's gotten a little of what she's wanted after all. The same ideals that left her out in the cold have now returned her to a place of warmth, somewhere where she can be playful and not be reprimanded or feel guilty about it. The next morning, when she's free to do just that, Illya takes full advantage. She insults Rin, toys around with Saber, and is just generally jovial. When she's not being a threat, she expresses those repressed emotions through the guise of a sweet, innocent girl as much as she is able. After breakfast, Illya begins to observe Shirou's daily life, which she finds absolutely enthralling. The more she learns about him, the more she realizes things weren't so black and white. Any preconceived notions she still had about Shirou are laid to rest. Even if it's something boring like practice with Saber, it humanizes Shirou beyond the object she once treated him as. Thus, without even trying, Shirou has already begun to teach her and expand her worldview. After training with Saber, the three take a lunch break, during which Saber wipes off Illya's face and tells her that though she's against the idea of Illya staying, she'll accept it if it's what Shirou wants. This scene serves two purposes. One, it's just cute, and two, like with Shirou sharing a taiyaki with her, it gives Illya another person to have a meaningful connection with beyond Shirou, growing her fledgling support network. She puts on a front of being childish, but being accepted into a group of people will help her grow. And it's ultimately what she's wanted since coming to Fuyuki. Acts of kindness like Saber seem strange to her, but she's quick to adapt to this new, warmer life. The day proceeds as usual for the quickly expanding Emiya family, and Illya is soon introduced to Taiga and Sakura. The former she takes a liking to almost immediately as their personalities synergize, and the latter is akin to introducing two friends of two completely different groups together. AKA, it's awkward, but it has room to grow. As Illya interacts with everyone, one thing is made clear. A lot of this seems like an act. As stated at the beginning of the video, a big criticism of Illya is that she's a glorified mototrope, but later in the day, when Rin and Shirou are discussing what to do about Castor, Illya interjects and joins the conversation, saying that she has important information and that playing the innocent little girl has worn her out. It's a role to her, something she does because she knows that's what other people see her as and what they expect from her. To make connections with others, she feels like she has to put on that act, lest she faces the fear of being rejected. That persona is why Shirou allowed her to be here in the first place. He wants her there as the sweet, misguided little girl and not Illya, because their surface-level conversations meant he never really got to know Illya. As Castor quickly gets Deus Ex Gilgameshed out of the story, and the Grail War swiftly approaches its end, Illya becomes sick. She, as the vessel, begins to lose more and more of her human functions as the last few servants are picked off. The dreams she had in Zero about turning into such a thing are coming into fruition here. Like Illyasviel, she will become the Grail whether she likes it or not. Illya is bedridden, Shirou and Saber are out on a date, and in a moment of weakness for everyone at the Emiya residence, Illya gets kidnapped by Kirei. If it seems like I'm rushing through this last bit of the story, I am. Illya largely fades into the background for the rest of the route. Shirou saves her at the end, but that's part of a larger goal of stopping Kirei and Gilgamesh. Even after this whole ordeal is dealt with, Illya doesn't have much to do. She gets saved and the route ends. In the epilogue, it's stated that she's now living with Taiga, but with that, Illya's presence and the fate route as a whole ends, leaving off with a fantastic ending for the route, but table scraps for Illya. Fate Route Illyasviel is a character that brings up many interesting points. As with most characters who aren't Saber or Shirou on this route, the stuff covered was mainly the fundamentals, leading to the other characters still being a mystery to be unpacked later. I'd argue that Illya gets the brunt of this treatment, however, as her character is still left with quite the mask on. While layers of it will begin to tear off in UBW, and especially in Heavensfield, here her character is ultimately left incomplete. But that just means what's to come is all the more impactful, as her roles will continually get expanded from this point on. In UBW in particular, it's revealed why the snowy-haired princess is the way she is at the start of each route, setting the basis for uncovering more about who Illyasviel Von Einzbern is at her core. So, if you're interested in that, join me in a week for part 2, as I discuss her small but impactful role in Unlimited Blade Works. If I didn't pick up on something of note, or if you have any thoughts, I implore you to leave them in the comments below. My name is Sleepy Crest, and I hope you have a wonderful night.